Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session, Zoonotic Diseases, Invasive Alien Species and the Wildlife Trade. Is the current EU legislative framework fit for purpose? My name is Anya Seetharam and I'm pleased to be moderating this very topical discussion today because COVID-19 has brought to our attention what can happen when humans and wild animals get too close. We now have a deadly pandemic caused by a zoonotic disease, which is thought to have jumped from bats to humans. Trade in animals and plants can also spread the risk of disease by introducing invasive alien species to Europe. Not only can some invasive alien species, or for short IAS, carry those zoonotic diseases, but they can also cause ecological and environmental harm and also economic damage by disrupting biodiversity. Now, it's estimated that there are 12,000 alien species in Europe, of which 10 to 15% are classified as invasive. So what's the EU doing about it? Well, it has an invasive species regulation, which focuses on priority species, as well as a number of other instruments covering animal disease agents and harmful plant organisms. And measures tackling the illegal wildlife trade have also become a top priority in Europe recently. And at international level, we have the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, which is also known as CITES. So how effective are these regulations and do they need an overhaul? Well, to discuss, we have three experts with us today. Let me introduce to you on the top slide, we have Doreen Robinson, Chief for Wildlife at the UN Environment Programme, and she's based in Nairobi, Kenya, where she's also a focal point for UNEP's COVID response and green recovery efforts. Doreen oversees a global portfolio supporting biodiversity conservation and wildlife management. In the middle, we have Ilaria Di Silvestre. She's Program Leader Wildlife, Eurogroup for Animals. As a pan-European advocacy group, its primary focus is to improve the well-being of as many animals as possible and defend their interests through lawful means and campaigning for better legislation. And our third speaker is Stefan Hetz, consultant for pet animals and international relations in the German Pet Trade and Industry Association, a member of the European Pet Organization. And Dr. Hetz is also an academic and doing research in all aspects of pet husbandry, pet welfare, and pet trade, including animal health, zoonosis, and invasive species. Now, before we hear from our speakers, I want to get a sense of who's in our virtual auditorium. So if you bear with me a second, I'm just going to launch a poll for you to be able to see. I'm just going to start it. This is called multitasking. And the questions are, where are you from? So do fill in. Are you from a company, business? Are you from an NGO or a think tank? Are you from a public authority? Do you represent academia, research, or are you from another category? And while we're waiting for the results, let me remind you that you can also ask questions by clicking on the green question mark symbol at the bottom right of your screen. On the left of the screen, you'll see a join chat button where you can converse with people in the room. And if you want to converse with the world or your Twitter followers, do share on Twitter hashtag EU Green Week 2020. And I hope in a minute I'm going to be able to share the result with you. We're nearly there. Okay, let's see what it says. Well, it's a pretty 32% are from a public authority and 7% are from other. Be interesting to know where you're from. And sort of 20% and 29%, 20% are from a company, business, private sector, 29% are from NGOs and think tanks, and 12% from academia and research. So thank you so much, everybody. That's good to know who's in the room, and quite a few of you watching and some more still joining. So we're going to come to our panel hear from our speakers now. They're just going to each make 3 short presentations, and then I hope you will send in your questions, because we're going to have a lively discussion, lots to discuss here, and a very topical discussion. So with further ado, I would like to give the floor to Doreen Robinson from UNEP. Doreen.
And do my own multitasking here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's an honor to be here today. I'll start in the place where the whole world is preoccupied, and that's the current pandemic. We do know this particular virus is 96% identical to a previously identified bat coronavirus. The pathway from bats to humans was most likely via some intermediary animal species, but we still do not know that species or exact pathway for certain. But it did happen. It spilled over from animals to humans. And now the virus has invaded most of the planet, transmitted by human-to-human contact. We also know that 60% of all known infectious diseases and around 75% of all emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic, meaning that they have origins in animals, both domesticated and wild. The evidence tells us that the number of events where zoonotic diseases jump from animals to people, those spillover events, is increasing. And we know that this is being driven in part by humanity's destruction of nature. A recent UNEP report identified 7 major drivers or root causes of zoonotic risk. From the demand for animal protein combined with lengthening global supply chains, to overexploitation of wild species, to habitat transformation coming from agriculture, urbanization, and industry, humans and animals are finding themselves in closer proximity. The way we live on this planet is increasing our risk from these diseases. And the environmental drivers of zoonotic risk are many of the same drivers of biodiversity loss, another global crisis, which was highlighted in yesterday's EU State of the Nature report. So zoonotic disease, in some cases the ultimate invasive species, are linked to environmental risk, but the story is not a simple one. There are many ecological principles at play here, and the playing field is an increasingly human-dominated land and seascape. Complex social, economic, and political factors overlap with environmental ones, changing the system and changing our risks. We know that deforestation and habitat fragmentation influence the spread of certain zoonotic diseases, particularly when they involve transmission through species that do well in transitional landscapes. Fast-spreading, opportunistic species like rodents, ticks, fleas, and others. We know that temperature, rainfall, and other climate factors influence the life cycle of pathogens and transmission and through the species that they work through. We know that the loss of biological diversity, including from invasive species, can also drive increased transmission in some zoonotic diseases. We know hygiene factors along changing local to global food supply chains affect transmission, particularly for meat protein, both wild and domesticated. We know all animal trade can pose some risk for zoonotic disease. But we also know that meat, including wild meat, is a critical source of protein for millions of people. We know that animal trade also provides important jobs, livelihoods, and supports sustainable development around the world. And in many cases, animal trade provides strong incentives to keep land and seas in a conservation status. My point is simply that these are complex systems, and within complex systems, there are no simple solutions. So what do we do about all of this in the context of today's session, enabling environments that are fit for purpose? First, we have to bring to bear all possible tools and mechanisms that we have at our disposal to address these problems. These issues cut across dimensions of environment, human, and animal health, and so the regulatory solutions must. We need to look across sectors, get out of our silos, and bring tools and resources together to find common solutions so that we can reap the co-benefits. The EU has a robust system in place for regulating and monitoring wildlife trade in the EU Wildlife Trade Regulations. Various committees and experts groups ensure coherence across the region and to inform decisions based on sustainability criteria. This is the main mechanism for implementing CITES in the EU. But there are limits to the mandate. Issues of invasive species are not there. We have to look to the EU regulation on invasive alien species for that. And public health risks from emerging zoonotic diseases are also not there. But there is a European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control. And with the European Food Safety Authority, they did put out a surveillance report on elements of food and waterborne zoonotic diseases in December 2019, for example. And there's also a One Health European joint program, which also prioritizes foodborne zoonoses and other emerging threats. But the linkage with broader environmental dimensions of these threats, also not fully there. This is just one example, and there are many other players in this space, but we need to bring these different frameworks, mandates, and expertise together to find common solutions. And we need to do more to incentivize the kind of multi-sectoral thinking and acting in our regulatory development. Which brings me to my second point. Many legislative and policy frameworks already exist at national, regional, and international levels to address some of these issues. And many of them are actually quite good, but many of them are not effectively implemented. We need to make sure we support the effective implementation of existing tools. Mitigating spread of zoonotic diseases and many invasives is in the purview of domestic legislation as well. Any expert knows the smart approach is to stop the spread at its source. So my third point, domestic and international legislation have to be equally strong and work together. Another lesson from COVID, we are only as strong as our weakest link. And my final point, we have to take an evidence-based approach to inform our legal and policy frameworks. There's been a lot of talk about prohibiting wildlife trade. In some corners, there's been calls for absolute and widespread bans on all trade. There is evidence, however, that bans, particularly acting on their own, do not have the desired public health or conservation effect. In 2018, the total global value of biodiversity-related exports was $864 billion US. This is a significant legal trade, and this number only reflects exports. But numbers never tell the whole story. Behind these numbers are jobs, benefit flows to local communities who bear the costs of living with wildlife, a set of incentives and disincentives that keep land and seascapes in conservation status versus alternative uses, and a very mixed set of skills and capacities to sustainably and effectively manage this trade. We need to consider these dimensions holistically. We need to evaluate alternative legislative and policy options to avoid unintended consequences. And we need clear cross-sectoral metrics of success appropriate to the complex array of risks that we're talking about. Breaking out of silos, embracing systems thinking, negotiating hard trade-offs in an uncertain world, and doing so with incomplete evidence is not easy, but there is no alternative. We are not fit for purpose if we don't work this way. So I will end where I started, the COVID pandemic. It has shown us the truly interconnected nature of the world and the need for interconnected responses to complex challenges. We have many of the tools we need, but we can deploy them better and link them better. Legal and policy frameworks on green recovery and the EU Green Deal are creating new spaces to advance the kinds of transformative approaches we need to reset how humans live, interact, and relate with nature. Fit for purpose demands that we act differently, and we do it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doreen. That's a very thoughtful presentation, and also you take quite a pragmatic approach there, stressing the importance of jobs in all of this, and also in terms of preserving the environment, in terms of what the wildlife trade can do for conservation. And you also, of course, very neatly spelt out all the various policies, regulations, frameworks there are, which look at all of this, the cross-sectoral approach. So how do we coordinate all of this? Should there be one body which has all the power for this oversight?
It's always an interesting question. I'm not sure that we need one body, but we do need perhaps stronger coordination mechanisms. And a few different places, depending on how we're approaching the problem, and then who has kind of the lead mandate. And the other point that I'll just add is also the first step to this is we've got to start talking in a common vocabulary and common language. The folks who talk about public health, the folks who talk about invasive species, the folks who talk about wildlife trade, sometimes don't use the same language. And the first step of getting these common approaches is broaching that. Thank you.
So much, Doreen Robinson. And I would now like to introduce our second speaker, Ilaria De Silvestre. Ilaria, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me today here. So I'm going to present you the positive list system as we think this is the best solution to regulate at least part of the trade on live wild animals. The previous speaker, Mrs. Robinson, clearly explained it. The legal and illegal trade on wildlife is one of the main factors of risk for the spreading of zoonosis. And experts have estimated that 1.6 million viral species are yet to be discovered in mammal and bird populations only. So this is very worrying. And indeed, several countries around the world have already started to revise their own legislation on wildlife trade to try to address this issue. What about Europe? The trade on live wild animals, which is where most of the risk for transmission of zoonosis are, is not only happening in remote Asian countries. In Europe, every year, millions of animals, live animals, from thousands of species are perfectly legally traded, so bred, imported, and kept in people's houses as exotic pets. And this is a growing trend, facilitated and promoted by the use of social media and online advertisement. In addition to that, millions of animals, of wild animals, are intensively farmed in fur farms. And in the last few months, we heard about the spreading of COVID among American minks in European farms in the Netherlands and Denmark. So millions of animals have been culled to try to control the spreading of COVID within these animals. However, the situation is still far from being under control. So what's the EU doing? During the pandemic, in the midst of the pandemic, in May, the European Commission adopted the EU Biodiversity Strategy to 2030. And this is an excellent strategy, very ambitious under several points of view. However, when it comes to the link between the trade on the wildlife trade and the spreading of zoonosis is extremely vague. There's a commitment to increase effort to fight illegal wildlife trade, which is of course crucial and very important, but there's a very vague sentence about what should be done to better regulate the legal trade. So it is enough to prevent future diseases and pandemics. We think it is not enough because if we focus now on the exotic pet trade, that is where most of the species are involved. There are thousands of species, and it's a very dynamic trade with many new species appearing on the trade every year. This is a complex trade that has effects in many different sectors. On human health, animal health, because these animals can be vector of diseases. On animal welfare as well, because these are wild animals that have not to be selected to be kept in people's houses, and they have complex needs. And to biodiversity conservation, under two aspects. First of all, because the trade can address species that are endangered in their country of origin because they are endemic or very rare, and this is particularly the case for several reptiles and amphibian species, so that they are threatened by the trade, they can become endangered because of this trade. But also, the exotic pet trade has been identified as one of the many pathways of introduction of invasive alien species. And the existing EU legislation are far from being cross-sector, as it has been mentioned by the previous speaker. They are targeting this aspect individually and also not efficiently enough when it's about exotic pet trade. The EU animal health law has been designed to focus mainly on risk coming from domesticated animals consumption. And the wildlife trade regulation is covering the species that are protected by the CITES Convention. Only 1% or less than 1% indeed of wildlife species are covered by this legislation, which means that endangered species in their country of origin, they can be legally imported in Europe, traded and kept. and this is pose several risks for conservation of many species. And finally, because as I mentioned, the exotic pet trade is one of the main pathways of introduction of invasive alien species, and the existing legislation is not fit for a so specific pathway that is extremely dynamic, as I mentioned, with many species continuously appearing. And I found a very interesting this new paper that has been published recently in Australia, which stressed that most desired pet species are more likely to become invasive alien species compared to other species, because they have high fecundity, broad climatic tolerances, and they are charismatic, which means that once they are released or they escape, because these very often can escape, it would become even more difficult to eradicate these animals because of public opposition. So we think that the only possible approach is a cross-sectorial and comprehensive approach, and the solution could be a positive list adopted at EU level. And on that topic, we work hand in hand with one of our member organizations, UP Animal Advocacy and Protection, which is running a rescue center for exotic animals in the Netherlands and in Spain. And they are in the first line to try to find solution for the problems created by the exotic pet trade, roaming animals. But of course, rescue center can't be the solution. The solution should be the EU. And I really would like to invite you to watch this video because summarize clearly the issue and why the positive list is a solution. So what's a positive list? The positive list, it's a list of species that are allowed to be kept as pet by the general public. So a simple, very transparent and preventive list. And indeed, it's nothing new in Europe because all the trade in any kind of product is based on a positive list system already. If you want to start to put in the trade this bat toy, you first have to check that the materials which is made and the product itself is authorized in the EU, is in the EU positive list for what is authorized to be traded. But if you want to start to trade on a live bat, and live bats are exotic pets in Europe because UP rescued some of them, you don't need any kind of permission. You can just start and trade on that. And this is the reason why more and more scientific studies are supporting the adoption of a positive list approach. So a positive list will, on the basis of a risk assessment, a scientific risk assessment, will identify those species that don't pose risk to animal welfare, human and animal health, people's safety, and species that don't risk to become invasive if released, and also that don't threaten species, the conservation status of species. So it's a very precautionary approach and very enforceable. And indeed, more and more member states are adopting this approach already. Since we started to work on that, on promoting the positive list system, we have seen 5 member states that are now adopted a positive list approach to regulate the exotic pet trade. Many others are considering the positive list system, and 2 are almost adopted the system. The positive list system. And, but of course, because of the internal common market, this will never work until when we don't have a harmonized and global EU approach. And indeed, this is what EU citizens want, because this opinion poll we commissioned together with UP showed that the large majority of EU citizens want the exotic pet trade to be regulated and want that this happen at EU level because of the internal market. So to finish, this is a complex issue touching many different aspects that need a comprehensive and coordinated solution. And we think this is a new positive list for exotic pet trade. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ilaria. That very interesting, and I think we'll continue the discussion about positive lists after the next speaker. I'm sure he's got a lot to say about them too. Just one very quick question for you. You talk about animals escaping and diseases spread by these wild animals. Can you give me one example?
For instance, one species that it has been now included in the invasive alien species under the invasive alien species regulation, the union list, is the raccoon. And the raccoon that are rescued since many years by UP are a vector of disease, a worm, that it could be lethal when transferred to humans. So, and these animals were kept. Now there's a ban on that species at EU level. But these animals were kept as pets, and the disease they bring, I can't remember now the scientific name of the disease, it's lethal, so very dangerous. So that's a concrete example.
Thank you very much. Good to see an example there, an animal that we can all recognize and identify with. Right, I'm going to hand over to our final speaker. This is before our discussion between speakers, and keep your questions coming in, please. So over now to Dr. Stefan Hetz.
Hello from Berlin. So I called it a perfect world, and I will talk about zoonotic diseases, invasive alien species, and wildlife trade from the pet trade perspective, which is one of a perspective which is missing before. So the EPO is the European Pet Organization, and on the right side you can see who is member of the EPO. It is an umbrella organization and has 11 members. And you also have a link to the website. If you have any questions about EPO, just go to the website. So if you could see where I'm sitting now, I'm sitting in my home office, and on the right side, I have lots of tanks. So I'm also a tank. So I'm also an aquarist with many tanks. I have also keeping experience and breeding experience, and I have also science experience. So because I come from science. So when I look at these topics, as we have zoonosis and everything, I'm always facing the EPO trade, of course, but also a keeper and a breeder experience, and also a science perspective. So this is important to know, because EPO mostly relies on scientific evidence, and this is important to keep in mind. So I can only shortly go through these 4 topics. It has already been stressed that we have very fast talks here, and I can only scratch the surface. So it's 4 main topics, and it's complex, and there's a lot of interaction, as the previous speakers already said. So it's really hard to bring in some information, but I give it a try. So if you talk about pets, you have to keep in mind the number of pets. So it's 500 million of animals within the EU. So the biggest amount is fish, and 500 million of animals mean that every EU inhabitant has at least one pet animal. This makes it clear how important the pet trade is for the European Union, and how important EPO is. So you can see here cats and dogs, and if it comes to small mammals, birds, reptiles, and fish, it's even fish tanks. So we don't know the number of fish. It's estimated at 300 million. So it's very important for us to know the numbers we are talking about. Mostly we see some numbers like many or less and so on, but it would be good for us to really have a very detailed information of numbers. Eurostat, the database, would be a good first approach to put all the numbers on species. So I mentioned fish already. The fish trade is relying from 8 to 10%, in my estimation, on trade with legally caught wild animals. So they are brought in from the tropics. And here I give a short example of a Ramsar site. It's called the Estrella Fluvial Inirida in Colombia, what I have visited together with some members of the WWF from Colombia. And this is a good example for the European Green Deal and sustainable catch of fish. And within these parts, within these communities, exotic fish, pet fish, are catched and exported to European aquaria. And one should acknowledge that there is also a benefit of trading with some wild caught species, and it also has some benefits to ecosystem and local communities, of course. Invasive species has already been covered by the previous speakers. There is an assessment. This is a precautionary principle. And as we always stress out in EPO, sustainable trade with pets. And it's important to not abandon any pet in a foreign habitat. The species may establish a population if they follow a generalist strategy, and generalists generally make good pets. Yeah, and we have to inform, and we do inform our customers about the harm an alien species may cause to foreign habitats. But as Ilaria in the previous talk stressed out, if it's like that, generalists generally make good pets. So we fear that following the precautionary principle, that all pets in future will end up on a union list someday, which would be really hard for the pet trade and also for the pet keepers. Some invasive species. Anja asked for invasive species in the previous target here. It's Procambarus clarki. It was a good pet animal until 2016 when this was put on the list. Yeah. But the worldwide aquaculture production of Procambarus clarki is 2 million tons, which make up to 20 billions of animals. So it's very important to have a multi-stakeholder approach, also involve the aquaculture sector and also involve the scientific sector, because Procambarus clarki was also scientifically kept pet in the past, and just get a bundle of all these stakeholder expertise. And it would be good to be involved, as the previous speakers already said, to be involved in an earlier stage of species assessment, which is very important. Zoonoses, it has been extensively explained what zoonoses are. So we have to keep in mind that many species co-involved with man, and the similarity of potential zoonotic diseases is higher in closely related taxa. And Chiroptera, so bats and rodents, because of the high number of species in the taxonomic order, put a relatively high risk on zoonotic diseases, and primates because they have a high similarity. But recent papers have shown that Chiroptera and Rodentia, that means bats and rodents, do not show a higher average zoonotic risk, and a proper personal hygiene reduces risk. I always say, if you have some problems with hygienic procedures, just put a screen between it. So put your or keep animals that are kept in terraria or kept in aquaria. That should be enough to keep zoonosis out. So let me focus on the trade. So birds and rodents are not traded as wild-caught species at the moment, and bats and monkeys are not traded at all. So I'm talking of a legal trade in a pet shop and so on. Okay, so we should generally better differentiate between different aspects of wildlife trade. To summarize, there's a lot of interesting and, in my opinion, very appropriate regulations on the EU sector. It's a complex topic. I agree with the previous speakers. There is some increase in flawed scientific papers. We read a lot of things that have these buzzwords, exotic, zoonotic, and stuff in it. And there is current information lacking going down to species level, where we can tackle whether a species has really an impact in trade. And there are very, very few opportunities with a multi-stakeholder approach. And we need to have discussions at an early stage from all concerned stakeholders and experts, like Doreen always stressed out in her talk. So coming back to the previous questions, or to the initial questions, is it a perfect world? I would say no. Is it fit for purpose? Almost. So that was my talk. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much and for being on time, and all our speakers there in agreement in some places, but all saying it's very complex, but not necessarily in agreement that the current regulations are fit for purpose. I would just like to ask you, Stefan, a question to you there. Why do people want to keep these exotic pets?
Well, That's a very interesting question. So for me, it's just an emotional thing. So if you want to keep exotic pets, you are interested in the special behavior, you are interested in color, you are interested in breeding them, and I think it's like you keep a normal pet. There's a lot of satisfaction with interacting with these pets.
If there were positive lists, clearly most of these exotic pets wouldn't be allowed, would they?
It came to a positive list, according to my previous speaker, Ilaria. Probably not, but a positive list is a very interesting thing. So Ilaria also stressed out that there are a lot of different reasons how to check whether animals are on a positive list or not. So threatened population, invasive species, animal welfare, zoonotic diseases. I just made some comments here, and I think the threatened population, invasive species, and zoonotic risks is already covered by the EU. So we have these regulation of invasive species, and we have a lot of regulations over there. And I think so there are lots of points that are against the positive list. So in my opinion, it's not fair to treat animals differently. So the positive listing probably will increase the effects that are unwanted, like illegal trade with animals that are listed. So people may say, hey, look here, it's something very interesting. So we have figured out that in these invasive crayfish species, now on the internet, these animals are traded, but they are not put in as Procambarus clarkae, but as some exotic Florida red crayfish or something. They use codes for illegal trade, and some people from the hobby are already looking at it and figuring out how these illegal trade is working, and I'm in contact with them, and in the EPO we can work against illegal trade, which is one of our key topics.
Much. I'm going to bring in Ilaria in a minute, but I just want to hear, Doreen, do you have any views on a positive list? Do you think they work?
So I think what's really important when we think about these lists is the capacity to actually implement them. I agree that it's not all positive on a positive list. One of the concerns, positive lists could have similar effects also to the way kind of overarching bans work, which can play a role in driving desired trade, because if people want these animals, they will get it, and it can drive it underground and lead to illegal trade in these species, which becomes even harder to monitor. So I do think we have to look at all these potential implications of incentives. I think the other thing that we haven't really talked about with regards to these lists, listing things doesn't help if it isn't part of a coordinated approach, and that includes also looking at demand management and the behavior change needed to drive whether people want to keep these animals and trade in them or not.
And Ilaria, you've heard the arguments there against a positive list, and you are very much for it. So just describe how well a positive list might be working in one of the EU countries where it's been implemented.
Indeed, I wanted to stress, to answer to this question, that the positive list system, it's not a ban, and this is why it's particularly interesting. It's a system that allow the trade on many species. So you already have the possibility to trade on that species. And in any case, we made, as Europe for Animals, a study to assess how the positive list system was working in Belgium, where Belgium has been the first country to adopt a positive list system for mammals in 2002 already. And then in 2009, the final list has been confirmed. And this system, and we collected data from rescue center, from the management authorities, from customs, and we found that it's not true that it's simply not true that there's an illegal trade caused by the positive list system. We found that the number of infractions were very limited, compared to other countries in which there's no positive list system and there's a negative list system, which is a list of species that are forbidden, because this is the most common approach, and this is also the approach in the invasive alien species regulation at the moment, or in the regulation of wildlife trade. So you ban some species, so that's the approach. But in the positive list system, you allow the trade on some species to the general public. Other people, specialized people that have the knowledge and can demonstrate to have the knowledge and the facility to have species that are not listed, can ask for a permit and then receive a permit. So this list is only for the general public, not specialized people. Those that have specific competence can still have species that are not in the list, but the system will allow for a monitoring of the process and to know exactly who is holding what. And indeed, I think we should learn from what is already there since several years now, and it's not something that we invited. It's already existing, and at the moment there are 6 European countries with a positive list system, and the system works. But of course, we need.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ilaria. I think we probably need to move on now to some questions. I think we explored the positive list, very contentious issue there and really interesting. A couple of questions have come in, and they both talk about the wildlife trade and they talk about endangered species such as tigers. I'm going to ask you this question and then you can decide who wants to answer it. Maybe all three do. The EU has seen an increasing trend in the private keeping and commercial trade of wild animals, which has increased the risk of zoonotic diseases, as we've been hearing. The commercial trade in endangered species such as tigers is also detrimental due to its adverse effects on biodiversity. Do you agree that further measures need to be taken to regulate the commercial trade in endangered species such as tigers? And there's also another question a bit further down again about, do you see merit in ending the non-necessary commercial trade in captive bred endangered animals such as tigers? So Doreen, where do you stand on this?
Yeah, so again, my fault to answer, these are all very complex issues. I want to start from the point, I'll talk about tigers, but it is important to note that when we're using the term wildlife, wildlife is also fauna and flora. The attention tends to be on these larger, highly endangered, mega charismatic species, but the policies influence a much larger suite of species. So when it comes to, the other thing is there are good measures in place. CITES provides a good measures for regulating the international trade. And remember, CITES is put in place for looking at, particularly a species like an Appendix 1 like tigers, no trade in wild caught animals is allowed. Any trade would come from captive breeding, but then the captive breeding facilities, obviously, a lot depends on the ability to monitor a particular state's ability to issue permits, to monitor the welfare of the animals, and all these issues that we've talked about. So I think the important thing too, is to be always looking at how these incentives for legal trade affect illegal trade, and again, use the science and the evidence to design that. But I don't think, I feel very strongly that, you have to look at the differential impacts in the science for the different species, and making a broad sweeping statement about commercial trade and how it impacts a particular species can be very dangerous.
Thank you. That's just shows how complex that is. Ilaria, a broad sweeping statement, a ban, is that a good or a bad thing?
I think I agree. It's a complex issue, but these are critically endangered species, so we should act immediately before it's too late. And I think the State of Nature report that was presented yesterday by the Commission clearly showed that we are losing our biodiversity and we should act now. So I fully agree that a ban on commercially traded endangered species is necessary, and the data collected from by FORPOS organization, but even confirmed by WWF, show that there's no control at the moment on the tigers that are traded in Europe and the products that are exported from tigers. So they contribute to the illegal trade. So something must be done, and it's quite urgent. If we just say that it's complex and we don't take action, we will never have a solution to that, and it will be late then to take action.
Ilaria, a question's actually just come in for you. It says, do we know where exotic animals are being kept in Europe? Where do they come from, and what their health status is? Ilaria.
This is the problem. This is a very good question. We don't know that. We don't have this information. We don't have a system of monitoring that trade because it's a huge trade. Imagine it could be quite easily to maybe monitor the trade on mammals, but when it comes to reptiles or amphibians, require a very high specialized staff to identify the species and to when they are imported. And this is the reason why we can't continue as it is at the moment, because there's no monitor possible. Instead, if you have a limited number of species and formed staff to recognize these species, identify these species, then it will be much easier to control. But at the moment, we don't have this information. We don't know what is imported and where. And I found it quite interesting also that the speaker from IPO mentioned that bats and mammals are not traded as pets. This is quite surprising and shows that indeed we have a problem. We don't know what is on the trade, because if you speak with Rescue Center, they are rescuing mammals and bats. And World Animal Protection recently asked data on that to the Netherlands authorities, and they found that many mammals, thousands of mammals, are imported as pets in the Netherlands, but we don't know from which species they belong, and the numbers are confusing. So definitely this is an issue.
If I could just add, based on what Ilaria just said, I think it's really important when we design responses to all of these issues that we really segregate the differences between illegal and legal trade. Not always easy to do, but the responses that you would have to curb an illegal trade would be different than how you might clean up and strengthen the management of an illegal of a legal trade. And so I think we just have to be careful in our responses that we make that clear.
Maureen, I just want to take a couple of other questions, and I'll pose them to Stefan Hetz. You talked earlier about educating some of the pet owners, and one question has come in about what about people's education and information on risks connected to exotic pets and risks for biodiversity? Surely a campaign like that would actually deter people from getting exotic pets, Stefan?
I would just answer the two questions that were raised, that were arising here. So when I was talking about the pet trade, it's the legal pet trade. If you have a shop or something, and you cannot go to a shop in Germany and if it's a member of the German Pet Trade Association and ask for a bat and get a bat there. So we have measures to restrict some trade of some animals. But when I talk of trade, and I pointed it out that there is a parallel trade from some owners who breed them, who get these animals from other sources than the legal pet trade here in, for example, in Germany. They may have pets and they may interchange it, and they may be traded in another sense of trade on the private sector via the internet. So I forget the question that.
The question is, if people knew about the risks and the dangers associated with exotic pets, that might actually deter some people from buying them.
Yes, but if you think about zoonosis that are already common, like Salmonella, which is a bacterium, it can compromise some people, and the trade clearly says if you have small children going around, it's probably not good to have a pet which can spread some Salmonella bacteria. That would probably deter them, but this is in the background of the One Health principle. It's important to point this out before the people buy their pet.
I'm just going to ask you another question while you're there. Ilaria has already picked it up, but you mentioned that bats and monkeys aren't being traded at all, but there is someone who runs a rescue center and says they know that these kind of animals do turn up in them.
I think I have answered these questions just before. I want to point out another part. There was a question where Ilaria answered that we have no idea what about the health status of any animals and so on. In Germany, there was a big study. It was called the ExoPet study. So it's called Exotic Pet Study. And there were lots of information there. If you send me an email, I can give you the link. And also this ExoPet study said there is no need to establish a positive list. If you would send me an email, I will send you the link to those papers from the German authorities that are still online.
Okay, thank you very much, all of you. Let's have another poll now and just get a sense of where the room stands on the regulations and whether they need to be excuse me, I'm just trying to do two things at once. I'm just trying to launch the poll. So do you want to vote now? Given the challenges we've seen posed by these invasive alien species, wildlife trade and zoonotic diseases, is the current regulation fit for purpose, the EU legislative framework? And do vote now. And we've heard of some of the in this discussion, some of the regulations that are in place. There are many, but perhaps they're seen as piecemeal. They don't always work together. They need better coordination. There needs to be better coordination between health and environment. And they're not necessarily all working together. So let's just see where you all stand on this. It looks like there's the last two. Some elements of the existing mechanism should be reinforced or improved. So yes, that seems to be the result. Then just behind it is new regulations or agreements are needed. That's 39%. 12% say, broadly speaking, it's fit for purpose, and just 2% of you say there's too much regulation here. So thank you very much for that. I just want to go around our speakers again then, just to react to that. So most people think that there should be some kind of alteration, and I think that agrees with with two of you. Stefan is broadly happy with the state at the moment. So Doreen, it clearly is a very complex area, and you have called for a more collaborative approach, less silo working. We do hear that a lot. So what should there be?
So I'll reiterate something Stefan just said too. I think the One Health approach and those frameworks will be essential. It does give an orienting framework to bring these different sectors together and ways of working together, everything from regulatory frameworks on down. So I think the other, in making any decisions about this, again, I always go back to science and evidence-based policy. With such complex issues, particularly when you're dealing with global supply chains, when you're dealing with different demand around the globe for certain things, we really have to make sure that we look at the evidence of what our policies will do, not only but in the source of where these wild animals live in the world, and make sure that we don't undermine conservation incentives. So again, bringing the data and the evidence into these collaborative discourses.
Thank you very much, Doreen. Ilaria, what about you? Where do we go next?
Well, I think that I clearly explained it in my presentation, also in my answer, that I think that we should change, because the existing legislation clearly is failing in providing an answer to the issue. The invasive alien species are still a big problem, despite efforts made by the traders to inform, to educate the public, and despite the invasive alien species regulation. Because again, the exotic pet trade is so specific and so dynamic trade that the existing legislation will not work with that to address it. And indeed, it's also a new trade. This is also the reason for that, because the reason why the existing legislation are insufficient to address this risk. So we should go further, because the existing legislation is not working on that sense, and it's urgent that we take action. So I think we should learn from what is already there and is working, and adapt, of course, to the context at EU level. It could be exactly, it can't be exactly the same system that is adopted at national level, but we should really try to find a solution harmonized at EU level to take into consideration all these aspects and to address the specific factor of risk.
Of course, the biodiversity strategy has been published, and you say it doesn't really address these issues. So what do we do? How do we do it?
It's the biodiversity strategy acknowledges that there's a problem with the wildlife trade. There's still the possibility to include in the implementation phase of the biodiversity strategy a regulation of the trade, a better regulation of the trade that takes into consideration all these aspects that I mentioned together. So this is perfectly possible. It's compatible with WTO that regulates international trade, and because restriction can be adopted to protect biodiversity. So it's something that is possible. So it's just a question of starting to work on that, and to work in cooperation with other sectors. And there's also, importantly, the new EU4Health program that has just been adopted, that also give the possibility to adopt new legislation on the basis of a sound risk assessment to prevent the spreading of new zoonoses. So this is also where it could fit a better regulation of the trade.
Very much, Ilaria. And Stefan, you said you're pretty much happy with the way that the regulations are at the moment.
I'm pretty much happy. I see there are lots of regulations on the EU level, and I'm particularly watching the animal health law at the moment, because this is some implementation of the One Health approach. It's, I think, 1.5 years behind his normal schedule, and we are all very interested in how it will be implemented and how it will work. So what Ilaria is asking for is some general approach, which includes the invasive species policy with the animal health policy and all these things together to build up a new system. And I think at the moment, once the animal health law implementation has not been finished, and we have no idea how this will work, how it will work in regards to the future regulations. At this moment, I think it's too early. But I agree with that we have to put all people together, and we have a more complex discussion about these things. So therefore, it's very important for us that we have this session today.
So just want to pick up on something Ilaria said there, but ask you, Stefan, what about the role of the WTO? Should it actually take more into account when it thinks about the impacts of trade and trade liberalization? Do you think it plays a role?
I think it could play a role, but I would put some pressure on the establishment of a more detailed recording system or a tracking system within the Eurostat. I checked Eurostat some weeks ago, so we only have reptiles traded. We don't go down to the species level. That would really be important for us. So then we can see more detailed information about what is traded from outside into the EU, and also what is traded within the European Union. That would be a good idea.
Very much. And we've only got about a minute left, so it leaves me to thank all our three speakers for a really lively discussion, and it's obviously very complex. We can't make decisions here, but thank you very much for sharing your ideas. And thank you for your questions and for watching. Just to say that when we close now, the next sessions will be on at midday. So do have a quick cup of coffee and then come back. And just to say, coming up next is a session on protected areas for social inclusion, nature restoration, win-win for biodiversity and climate. Here in the auditorium, a mock trials debriefing, and also farming for food and for nature, how farmers can become the actors of sustainable transition. So thank you all very much for watching, and see you later.